In 2022, I interviewed the cameraman who filmed Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh's unaliving. I also spoke with 3 Palestinian journalists who knew her. To my surprise, my newsroom did not publish the story. But I still have my notes from my interviews, and with so many journalists being killed in the violence now, I think it's time to tell this story. Shireen Abu Akleh was a prominent Palestinian-American reporter for Al Jazeera. She was shot dead as she covered an Israeli raid in the occupied West Bank, sparking global condemnation. For Al Jazeera cameraman Majdi Banoura, who filmed Abu Akleh's reports for more than 25 years, she was more than a famous journalist. She was, quote, a friend, sister, and colleague. On May 11th, 2022, Banoura filmed one final frame of Abu Akleh, the moment she was gunned down in Jenin. The day of Shireen's death was one of the most difficult days of my life, he told me over WhatsApp, speaking in Arabic. Her death had a great impact on me, Banoura told me. The two had covered wars and incursions in the past. They had been in situations where they faced great risks. But this day, according to Banoura, was very different. Quote, we were shot directly. We were clearly dressed as press and there was no kind of resistance. However, we were targeted. Musa al-Shayer, a cameraman and member of the Palestinian Journalist Syndicate, knew Shireen for 20 years. He told me it was clear that day that Abu Akleh was a journalist. Quote, she has the helmet, she has the jacket with the press and the microphone in her hand, he explained. Shireen was targeted as a messenger. She was doing her job. She was only a journalist. Her weapon was only the microphone and the camera behind her, he said. I reached out to the Israeli government on June 8, 2022 for its response to these allegations. This is the statement they sent me, attributed to Defense Minister at the time, Benny Gantz. The IDF is conducting an ongoing investigation into the matter in order to reveal the truth. Any claim that the IDF intentionally harms journalists or uninvolved civilians is a blatant lie. But videos obtained by CNN, corroborated by testimony from 8 eyewitnesses, an audio forensic analyst, and an explosive weapons expert, suggest Abu Akleh was shot dead in a targeted attack by Israeli forces. Shayer was also steadfast in his assertions when he spoke to me on May 23, 2022. Quote, they want to scare the journalists in order to not be in the field, not to broadcast their crimes against the Palestinians. Al-Shayer knew Abu Akleh for 20 years, working alongside her as they reported on various clashes, incursions, and conflicts. Journalists in the West Bank would move in groups, he said, to protect themselves. He said Abu Akleh didn't shy away from asking tough questions. She was, quote, cynical and, quote, honest at press conferences, and very objective, he said. But she was known for one trait above all, her humanity. Quote, the first time you met her, you knew that you're meeting a person that never lies and has humanity in her heart. That's according to Linda Safarini, who first met Abu Akleh in Jerusalem in the mid-90s. Despite working in war zones and witnessing horrors, she said Abu Akleh never changed. Another Palestinian journalist I spoke with, Majid Sawalha, told me the global community must learn a lesson from Abu Akleh's killing. He said journalists are supposed to be protected by international human law and humanitarian law. Safarini added that international law needs to grow a backbone. On top of bolstering protections for the press, both Safarini and al-Shayer called on the world to honor Abu Akleh's memory by educating itself on the plight of the Palestinians. These figures are from when I did my research in 2022, but in the last decade, more than 3,572 Palestinians and 198 Israelis have been killed in the conflict, including 806 Palestinian children and 14 Israeli children, according to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Israel also controls 85% of Palestinian water sources in the West Bank and Gaza, according to the UN, and Palestinian per capita access to water consumption in those regions is below international recommendations. Checkpoints also provide massive hurdles to free movement in the West Bank and Gaza. In late 2020, the UN OCHA reported nearly 600 Israeli roadblocks and checkpoints in the West Bank alone. There are many of these checkpoints on the road between Abu Akleh's home in East Jerusalem and the refugee camp in Jenin that she regularly covered. Safarini told me that due to issues with free movement, many people in the Jenin camp will live all their lives without visiting Jerusalem. People like her aunt, who died at age 84 without ever visiting the city. While the refugee camp is densely populated, it's also brimming with art. There's a music troupe that plays for residents and people paint the walls. Safarini told me that Abu Akleh spent lots of time in the camp, not only as a reporter, but as a humanitarian. Quote, she always went there. She was always seeing them, helping them, eating with them. Safarini told me this is the best way to honor Abu Akleh in our daily lives. Quote, be the voice of the voiceless. In the 8 days since the recent conflict began, 12 journalists have already been killed. When you hear those stories, remember them and remember Shireen. What do you think of all this?